Well, Harmon, we're back in your office, and this will be the first episode of America's First Refugee where I'm here with you
That's
in
right.
New Zealand.
That's right. Carolyn and I were just saying, isn't it unusual for her to see him here in person with me, and yet you're still not here? And that's the hard part of it. It's just seeing you, continuing to see you stuck in that screen, so to speak, and not being able to touch you or to have you here it's really hard. I mean, I can't say that enough. It's really, really hard, and I know you feel that way too, dear.
I'm jealous, Jason.
Well, I hope that my participation can in some way help in bringing you guys together, back together.
Oh, man.
The more we raise awareness of the story and let people know that the governments of the United States and Canada and New Zealand have essentially conspired to keep you apart. And that is a direct violation
Absolutely.
of your human rights according to the UN, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
What is that specific citation in the human rights?
Oh, gosh, there's about 12 of them.
But it does say you're not allowed to be separated from your family,
That's right. And they're not allowed to interfere with your family.
Which they've been doing.
Yeah, for sure.
It's disgraceful.
Big time.
So, as we usually do in these episodes, why don't we begin with a little update, Carolyn, on what's been happening with your shareholder oppression case against your brothers who own the Dare Food Corporation?
Well, as everyone knows, that the oppression case initially was dismissed, and that was quite some time ago. Then we took it to appeal, and unfortunately, that has been dismissed as well after they took 5 weeks to come up with the answers
A bit longer, actually.
to what our attorney put down. They just said disagree.
Huh.
They didn't give any reason as to why they disagreed. They got, I don't know whether they got influenced or whether they got lazy or whatever, but they should not have disagreed. It should have been accepted.
Well, just for a moment there, Carolyn, I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but when I answered the civil lawsuit that I was in, that is the way to do it. It's either agree, deny, or I don't have enough information to answer that. I don't think they do ever give an explanation.
No, that's when you answer it. But when a judge actually makes an adjudication, they have to provide the law behind it. It wouldn't be unusual for a case of this size that's been going on now for 4 years to have a 40, 50, 60, 70-page decision from the appeal court.
I see.
This was a 10-page decision. Around 5 or more pages was just the history of the case. And the rest of it was the final decision, where they basically took the arguments, which they're supposed to say, you said this, and here was your argument, and here was the law, here's what we say. And then they'll go for pages to saying but they basically said, we disagree.
That's it.
That's it.
Huh, so that's not the standard way for handling this type of case.
No.
Very interesting.
No,
Very
no.
interesting.
They more or less, as I've put it, they dismissed it out of hand. And the word dismissed kind of tells the story, doesn't it? You've been dismissed.
Yes, summarily, as it were. So, I mean, this is yet another example of, we've been seeing a lot of these cases of what people have basically classified as lawfare, where they could just tie you up in the courts forever.
Yeah.
And this is really hitting at your ammunition, Carolyn, because
right.
without your rightfully owed inheritance from, you're an heiress, obviously. You are a member of the family, and you're in your father's will, and you own these shares, but your brothers are just totally obstructing. I think it's disgraceful the way your brothers are acting.
Well, what's interesting about this, and as Harmon would say, it's the coincidence or preponderance of evidence. With every case that we've had, Harmon has had, as well as I have had, it's always been dismissed. We have never won a single, is that right, honey? We've never won a single case yet.
We've won different hearings when it comes right down to the final case, with the cases about here as well as the ones in Canada. And even the UN case was dismissed, and we ended up getting that reopened. It's just been the way that it's going. I mean, if I might add, as you look at the beginning, this is, by the way, the second part of our Wilfred versus Dare.
Right.
As I look at what's highlighted at the beginning, it says part 3. This is part 3 of the whole series, but this is part 2 of this one. Episode 10, which is what this is, or now this is 11, of this interview series outline, focuses on the shocking dismissal, which is what we're talking about, of Carolyn's oppression suit appeal decision released by the Canadian Appeal Court on April the 23rd. However, we are now more confident than ever that we will defeat the Dare bully boys. Now, talk about that for a moment, dear.
Yeah.
Because we're really more confident than ever that we will defeat them.
Well, what we have just done within the past few days is filed a leave to appeal, which basically, if that is accepted and not dismissed, then we get to go to the Supreme Court. And the reason we've done this is, first of all, because I believe that what happened in the court was totally wrong. The attorneys have said that it should never have been dismissed because there's another case that was accepted that was based on
one, yeah.
fair. It was one based on fair and equitable, of which
versus contract law, yeah.
Of which my brothers are not fair and they are not equitable.
Definitely not.
And also the reason we have filed that is because people who are in my same situation in private family companies who are minority shareholders, they are oppressed, they are bullied, they if they don't do as they're told, then they are punished. So it's very much like a cult. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but my family and the business that my family runs is like a very small, wealthy cult. It's similar. I mean, it's very small compared to the Rothschilds, but that's basically what it's like. So from the time I was raised, there was sexual discrimination. My mother was not allowed to work outside the home, even though she was a dental assistant and a trained dental assistant. And she was, she loved her job and she really wanted to do it. But my father forbid her from working outside of the home. I guess in a German family, it didn't look very good if the wife worked outside of the home, and he certainly felt that he should be taking care of her. But sometimes taking care of people is allowing them to do something that they enjoy doing and love.
Carolyn, Harmon actually shared some photos of your mother and even some artifacts of her old toys and things.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
That was quite fascinating to see.
Yes.
Some of this stuff was, 90 years old, or maybe even 95 years old?
Her bear, bear and the carriage that the bear is in is probably about 97 years old now.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah. It looks brand new. And also, when you said the magic word about what happened, it caused me to think of Charles Ortel. And of course,
what happened here? Anyway, what happened? Everybody knows about what happened, don't they?
Very ironic that Harmon now has a copy of the book. And this is the New Zealand edition, I guess, because the cover of the book looks substantially different than the one that I have in New York. So you guys can review that book and try and determine if Mrs. Clinton had anything to do with what happened. It may sound a bit far-fetched to people watching for them to assume that the Clintons are yet again involved in this. It's a civil case, of course, but yet it does seem that there's an influence there to prevent Carolyn from getting the money, to prevent you guys from really being able to mount these suits. Harmon, of course, you mentioned that your UN human rights case remains open. It's, as I understand it, it's sort of in limbo. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
Should we talk about that a little bit, or do we want to? Is there some more stuff we want to say about the Dare Foods matter?
Let's stay with the Dare stuff for the moment, because I'd like to just recap a little bit of what we talked about last time.
Yeah.
This is sort of a backdrop, really, to the whole thing that we talked about last time around the 99% versus the 1%.
Right.
And some would say that the exclusively rich have sort of lulled the world population into a kind of economic cult, which is what Carolyn's talking about, but hers is sort of on the family level. One of the reasons why we're filing this appeal that Carolyn alluded to a moment ago is because there are a lot of families out there who've used these same kinds of corporate structures where they're literally taking their bully approach to the family and controlling family members, and they're putting it into corporate structures, and the corporate structures themselves, as they're written, these shareholding agreements that are in holding companies that hold shares in operating companies, it sounds a little complicated, but it's not so much. They will literally keep a family member from getting the benefit of the operating company even though they own a percentage of it through a holding company. And that in and of itself is inherently oppressive. So inasmuch as her brothers have said, we haven't done anything to oppress her, the very fact of the holding agreement itself is the basis of the oppression. Because they are directors of the holding company, they're directors of the operating company, they're shareholders of both, they control everything, she controls nothing. They've managed to get dividends out of the DARE group of companies on a regular basis, millions and millions of dollars, where for a period of like 5-6 years they gave her nothing, and they could get away with that only because they controlled the holding company, which would get dividends from the operating company, turn them back into the operating company again as a loan, pay nothing out into the holding company, so Carolyn would get nothing, and then pay them dividends out of the pay themselves dividends out of the operating company. And that, by definition, is oppression, but because the contracts were written that way, the judges then ultimately said, well, you know what, a contract's a contract, they're allowed to do that, so we're going to dismiss the case.
Wow.
But the equitable law, the contract law, or commercial contract law versus the equitable law now that is taking precedent in these oppression cases is saying, I don't care how the contract is written, if it's unfair and unjust, then it's oppressive.
Right.
Which was the argument that was used. And if we can win that, now Carolyn mentioned was going to the Supreme Court. I think there's an interim court that we're going to right now for a judicial review before it goes to the Supreme. But either way,
that's what I said. Yeah.
Yeah, but either way, we need to take it on, not just for our sake. You know, we're always out there doing things for people's sake that their rights are being violated. It's really for the rights of all these people who are being oppressed in these kinds of contracts. Now, in a small sort of way, we're fighting a battle that we also like to help people fight from the 99 versus the 1. It's the rich people who control everything, who basically keep the 99% oppressed.
Now, let me ask you this. This is, of course, it's a civil case, right? Mm-hmm. Is there anything that the Dare brothers have done that crosses over into illegality as far as what you're talking about with the holding company and the operating company and the shares and the money? Are they doing any financial finagling in there that could cross it over into a criminal thing? I know you've said in the past they have this offshore account, and so it sounds like there's a lot of funny business going on with the Dare brothers.
Well, as we mentioned before, the Paradise Papers actually found something that we'd already revealed to the tax authority, that they have a Cayman trust, or they've had a Cayman trust, offshore trust in the Cayman Islands, where it was never revealed to the tax authorities. And as of the year 2000, Canada finally said enough's enough. If you've got an offshore trust, you have to report it, and you have to report all the income you're getting from it.
And they haven't done that.
They didn't do that. They literally filed fraudulent tax returns.
Wow.
Since the year 2000. And when Carolyn finally had to report, because she was also a beneficiary of that trust, she then had to, she felt...
I still am.
She felt an absolute requirement to report to the CRA all the places that she could get income from in order to pay her tax. Well, that was that departure tax. So when she reported to them the Cayman Trust, her brothers and her father got really angry with her, because then they had to hire attorneys in Canada, attorneys in Cayman. The CRA came down on them, which is the tax authority, and they ultimately ended up having to pay millions of dollars in tax, both personally and in the Caymans.
We're not sure how much they had to pay.
Well, they didn't reveal that to us, but they were pretty darned angry about it. And after that many years of not paying tax, you can imagine how much tax is accumulated. Use your imagination on that one.
Boo-hoo, the millionaires try to steal money and get caught. I can't say I'm upset about that.
Well, they get caught, but here's the key. Because they're so wealthy, because they're so influential, both in the court system, the government, the tax system, and so on, all Papa has to do, and he's in his 90s, but he's a pretty smart fellow.
He was at the time.
You bet. He went to the tax authority. He told them a story, goodness knows what he said, and he then bragged with us during a shareholder meeting, by the way, I've gone to the CRA and I've taken care of this for the boys.
Wow. So that's
Yeah.
pretty
So
shocking.
they got off.
He's taken care of it for the boys, but nobody said, how can we help you with your tax? Nobody said that. Not my father, not my brothers. If they had helped me with my tax when it came due, it wouldn't be almost double.
Yeah.
Because they have played with me. I think their motivation in all of this is to financially absolutely put me in the pooper so that they can buy my shares basically next to nothing.
Now, wait
and
a
that's
minute.
why they haven't helped me. And they not once have they said, Carolyn, let's talk. How can I help you with this? Let's work it out. Not once.
Now, what you've just described, Carolyn, that definitely sounds, it's something here. See, I mean, I'm obviously not a lawyer and certainly not even informed of Canadian law. But what you've just described, Carolyn, sounds like a very unfair way. I mean, how could it not be criminal for them to manipulate the shares and do these types of things to drive your price down? I mean, it's almost like insider trading.
Well, you could say it borders on that for sure. But oppression at the very least, and that's why the oppression laws are very strict in Canada. But for us and for Carolyn, all of a sudden they're not strict.
Yeah.
For us,
Yeah, I know.
they dismiss
That's
it
right.
out of hand when they're ordinarily the harshest system in the world for
It's not right.
oppression. It's just, coincidence or preponderance of evidence.
Right.
I mean, that's the whole point. I mean, these guys have gotten away with it, and now, and when we went into this oppression case and we brought that evidence into the oppression case to show that they were being dishonest, the oppression case wouldn't consider it because the CRA refused. They sealed the file. They refused to open the file to provide any evidence. So there was no evidence of it that we could present
Wow.
because their tax returns, all the stuff that they did over the years, and all the record that the CRA had was now sealed.
Why is it sealed?
To protect them, of course.
Well, was it sealed or was it just not revealed to us?
No,
I
it was
don't-
sealed.
They refused to reveal it to us. But my question with that was what involvement was the CRA with my brothers and my father where they felt that they had to not reveal the information?
Right.
Now
They
that
must
gets
have done something, unusual, like what you were describing
Yeah.
about Carl Dare contacting
Yeah, that's
the
right.
Canadian Revenue Authority and making this problem go away. I wonder who
That's
he
right.
was dealing with there at the CRA.
We
And
don't
that's
know.
sort of the Canadian equivalent of Lois Lerner.
That's
And
right.
I'm telling you, this reeks of criminal wrongdoing.
Yep. And keep in mind now, well, let's go back for a second to the human rights case. When I filed the judicial review and we had Canada locked in to the human rights case again, within a month, when they realized I had them locked back in and they knew that Carolyn was funding the case through her estate, the CRA stepped in and they froze her assets so she could no longer fund anything. And that pretty
And
much
I was the only one.
put the human rights case on hold, and it's been on hold ever since.
Because you just don't have the money to get it
That's
done.
right. That's right.
That's right.
So they froze that case. Now, is that wrong? How much can the
I mean,
government get away
they
with?
froze my assets.
Th-
yes.
That's right. How much can the government get away with to cheat? Because that's cheating. We've got them in a case. Nobody has said that they haven't violated my human rights. They basically got the case dismissed. We went in and asked for a review. They then froze her assets, and it still sits there after, 9 years now?
Wow, it's kind of, I don't know if you guys will get this reference, but it's sort of a Canadian Kobayashi Maru where they're just changing the rules because they don't like the proposed
That's right.
outcome.
But then, to add insult to injury, when the CIA
They
now
did
now
change
here's
the
where
rules.
here's where the connections come in. The CIA, the Clintons, who were running the government, the U.S. government at the time, who didn't want to get found out. My UN human rights case, which pointed out the Clintons, and it had the Clintons in there personally as well as the government. Okay, for the human rights violations and what the Clintons were up to and what they were doing. All this was reported in that case.
Right.
They did not allow that case to go forward, or at least it's still sitting there. In the meantime, they put so much pressure on us after having me in the federal prison in the U.S., and I finally got out because they violated the treaty between the two countries, got back to Canada. Then we were forced out of the country. We literally fled for our lives, had to leave. We would never have left Canada if it weren't for that, because Canada was cooperating with the U.S. and the CIA.
Right.
So we went to Hong Kong, not unlike Snowden,
Right.
and ultimately we ended up in New Zealand. And so then the CRA comes along and says, you've left the country. You owe a departure tax. So what they do is they say, let's get the value of all your assets, which at the time was something like 40 million, and we're going to, you now owe departure tax on that, which at the time they had quoted it at something like $20 million.
Yeah.
And then little by little, that's been
Wow.
pushed back and forth and negotiated back and forth, and it turned out to be like 6.5 or so million negotiated. And now it's accumulated at $1,000 a day in interest. It's accumulated to nearly 9 million. But none of that would have ever happened, nor would she have left Canada. And keep in mind, she's never been able to sell these shares.
Yeah.
So how can you pay $9 million tax on shares that you can't sell? And now the Canadian courts are saying, no, we're not going to force the brothers to buy them. And even though they've gotten in the way of your being able to sell them, which is also oppressive, they basically let them win the case. So here we sit with a $9 million, what Carolyn does, with a $9 million tax bill, unable to sell the shares. The boys are not being forced to buy the shares. So how can you pay $9 million tax on shares that you can't sell?
What is it that you guys think they hope to achieve? Are they waiting to outlive the two of you, and then do they?
Well, they're not going to outlive me.
But I'm just saying, what would legally happen, Carolyn, in the event of your demise if your brothers remain? Those shares are still owned by you, and I presume bequeathed to your daughter, right?
They're left to my daughters. I have 2 daughters.
Yeah,
So
well,
what is
but
it that
there's
these
a
guys
twist
hope
in
to
this.
achieve?
There's a twist in this. Let me just tell you a legal strategy that could be brought up. Although the CRA is kind of forbidden to take this strategy for the moment, it could come up, where now that she can't sell the shares, and the CRA now are forced to give it to the sheriff to sell the shares, but the sheriff can't do any better than we've done, because
The sheriff, did you say?
oh yeah. In other words, they've taken her shares. They've grabbed onto her shares, they've frozen them. They now have to turn them over to a sheriff for an asset sale so that the taxes can be paid. But the CRA are not allowed to sell the shares for anything less than fair market value. But if you're trying to determine fair market value, you have to be able to sell the shares to determine fair market value. And fair market value should be the value of the actual operating company assets, not just the holding company assets. So
Such a complicated
this thing
case.
is just going in a circle where we can't sell the shares, the boys aren't being forced to buy the shares. If we try to sell the shares, they get in the way, but even getting in the way isn't oppression according to the court. So the CRA sits there saying, well, all right, we'll just accumulate interest at $1,000 a day for the time being.
Hey, something just occurred to me, Harmon. Is it at all possible that Carl Dare, when he spoke to the CRA and said, hey, I know I got this big criminal tax liability with this offshore thing. How about we just make that go away, and I'll make sure my daughter's husband and she never get access to this money?
That would not surprise me a bit. And I
Yeah.
mean, that's the point that we're
And
about to
he
get to
wanted
here.
us separated so badly, and my brothers want the same thing because they participated in it.
And the Clintons and the government have always wanted
Wow.
the same thing.
Yeah.
I really feel like being here and speaking with you guys face to face like this, I'm getting so
Yeah.
much insight
Oh,
into
yeah?
what may possibly be going on here. But it really does seem like some sort of criminal collusion between the Dare Foods shareholders, specifically Carolyn's brother and the late Carl Dare,
And the CRA.
and the CRA. Possibly. It seems like that could be possible.
Because they've never really, I mean, you'd think they'd want their taxes paid, right? So we asked the CRA to join us in the oppression suit because they're being oppressed as well because they can't get their taxes collected. But the CRA jumped in and said, no, we're not going to join you. In fact, we're going to give them a letter saying that whatever the court decides, we're fine with. Now go figure.
Why would the CRA do that?
Good question. The CRA, like the IRS, are usually the most aggressive ever to
About
make
collecting the
sure
money.
they get their money paid. That's right. Even if they had to threaten to audit the Dare Foods company in order to get the money out of them. But they're not being aggressive towards Dare Foods or CIRAD or any of those guys at all.
What's that, Carolyn?
So why are they favoring my family and continuing to what's the word, oppress me in a way?
Yeah, why?
So I'm being oppressed on more than one front.
Well, see, one of the theories was that if she can't sell her shares, then the CRA could come along and the boys could then buy her shares for the price of the tax, which her shares are worth at least 55 million, probably more from what we're finding out.
And they want to buy it.
But they come along and buy her shares for $9 million. The tax is paid off. She loses all of her shares. The boys have got the shares and they go on happily, and she goes off broke.
Is that possible to happen?
Well, when we brought that up, because it seemed like it was possible, you know, if the CRA want to get the shares sold, they can sell them for whatever the tax is. But in this particular instance, we're told by our attorneys that the CRA can't do that. They've stuck themselves as well, because they're not allowed to sell the shares for anything less than fair market value. Otherwise, they could be sued for the balance.
I see.
But then the question is, what's fair market value if they can't be sold? I mean, this is just a merry-go-round that we're on right now.
Absolutely. Sorry, Carolyn, what was that?
Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Sorry, dearie.
No problem. I know you're both very... This is an emotionally charged
It
thing
is.
to be discussing, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, it's silly. I'll just read this. This is number 11 and 12 in the outline in page 2. Neither the Clintons, the CIA, the CRA, in this particular instance, or the Rothschild cartel, nor the Canadian government can ever allow, and you just said that earlier, can ever allow Carolyn to win her oppression case or receive the funds for her shares and the tens of millions of dollars, which is what they're worth, for fear of being completely exposed.
Right.
Because as to Carolyn's brothers in Dare Foods, whether they are deliberately or unwittingly involved in this conspiracy, and you just alluded to that, they still stand to win by forcing Carolyn out of our marriage and maintaining complete control over her, here we go with the cult again, and the entire family fortune. Being bullies also comes natural for the Dare boys because that's part of the family cult.
Wow. Wow.
So you know, if you ask the question, what's the connection between the Clintons and Dare Foods? That's the connection.
The offshore accounts.
Well, the offshore stuff, the fact that Carolyn cannot get her money because they know we've got them. We've got them on the UN case. We could sue the CRA for what they did. We could sue the Canadian government for having cheated and locked up her shares in the first place.
Well, and locking you up, I would think.
And locking me up, that's right.
You can sue them for
and
quite a
we
bit.
can definitely sue New Zealand for what they've done, which I'm really looking forward to.
Wow.
I mean, the preponderance of evidence in this, and the pattern that's happened between the U.S., Canada, and New Zealand is just remarkable.
And it's undeniable.
It's incontrovertible, as they say in the legal world.
Correct. I agree with you. So, what is the next step? What is the hope for resolving this matter, Harmon?
Well, the appeal for a start. I mean, our hope is that we're not going to be so controlled as we take it to the next level. At some point in time, this has got to become so obvious that even the judges can't continue to do this. And there's also probably some pressure on the boys right now. I say the boys, her brothers, because I'm sure they want to get on with their acquisitions and their expansion. And as long as they have this
albatross hanging around.
Well, it is an albatross. I mean, it's a debt of a sort. There's another word for it, but anyway, they have this cloud hanging over the company. And so anybody that's trying to give them financing or anybody that they want to combine with or acquire or whatever, they've got to be sitting back and saying, well, let's wait till that's done. Because if you guys lose that case, you're going to be out 50, 60, 70 million dollars, maybe more. And so that's a pretty big liability.
Right.
So
that would also...
It's like the story in the Bible of the woman and the unjust judge. The judge kept not listening to her, kept not paying attention to her, kept saying no, 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 and she just kept pestering and pestering the judge. She wouldn't give up, and finally the judge said, "Oh, for Pete's sake, to get rid of this woman, just give her what she wants."
So that's Carolyn.
Yeah.
She's not going to give up until she gets what she wants, not because she wants something she shouldn't have,
right?
Because she wants something that belongs to her in the first place.
That's right.
Yeah, that's it. I kind of, although it's a nice story and I appreciate the way you presented it, I kind of don't like that analogy because I don't feel like you're pestering anyone, Carolyn. I feel like I don't even think oppression is the appropriate word. It's targeted financial aggression. It's in many ways very similar to how they grabbed Harmon and just stuck him in jail. They don't care what the law is. They don't care
That's
what's
right.
right. They're just blocking you guys. This has got to end.
It's got to end.
does. And
But
it's not so much pestering, it's the fact that we're not going to quit. I'm not
Right.
going to quit until I'm treated with respect and fairly. And that's the bottom line. I have not been treated with respect in that family, and I definitely have not been treated fairly.
And if anyone wants to go to the outline and the narrative, I mean, assuming that we've already covered a little bit of that today, you can see the detail in which Carolyn provided in her personal narrative, starting with page 4, on exactly how she's been treated in that family since she was a child, and how that is a reflection of now how she's being treated as an adult, using these corporate structures to continue to keep her oppressed and continue to be prejudiced against her as a woman. And that's why she should have won the case, because it's not equitable. With the Me Too movement going on nowadays and all that,
Yeah.
Oh, Lord.
this should be an abomination to the women of the world and the powerful women of the world.
Yeah.
The powerful women of the world. Hey, what happened, eh?
Good point. Excellent point. Yes, we always hear Mrs. Clinton talking about how she's a champion for women. I think she's a champion for oppressing women.
Well, and in this particular
Well,
instance, she and her husband were directly involved in all of this.
Yeah, yeah. She said she was a champion for children, which is the biggest hoax, lie I've ever seen, because she took Harmon's children away from him for political
She did
recognition.
nothing for us. Remember the letter that that Carolyn read, that you read,
Yes.
about well,
It takes a village.
It takes a village. It takes a
Right.
global village.
Well, and I remember Carolyn saying that she had a very positive opinion of Hillary Clinton at the time that she wrote that.
At the time.
Because we believed all of the
hype.
hype, yeah, about her, all of the propaganda about her, how she was wonderful and doing all this stuff for children, but not for my children as an American.
It's interesting how we see some of these people who focus on hype and putting out stories that have no basis in reality, but I think they know that the mere act of saying something, particularly when you have a large platform, there are a certain number of people who will believe it. And I'll say, Carolyn and Harmon, part of the reason I think that Crowdsource the Truth has been oppressed by these various techniques of submitting strikes and trying to prevent us from getting our word out is that they don't want your story getting out. And when
This
we
is
have,
big.
every week when we have 10,000 people viewing, I mean, I don't presume to think that a subscriber base of 58,000, I mean, it's not the same as being a candidate for president of the United States or being Fox News or CNN or something like that. But the people that want to suppress this information don't want to see it grow week over week. They're doing everything
That's
they
right.
can to keep the information down and to keep you guys from getting just your basic rights. And I have a feeling that there are a lot of viewers who just
Right.
will watch and simply say, oh, 40 million and you're in this house. And because it's money, they don't feel sympathy, because if someone doesn't have money, they don't necessarily feel sympathetic toward a millionaire. But this money is preventing you from having your family, from having your life. They've thrown you in
That's right.
jail. They've taken so much from both of you that can never be gotten back. It's got to end.
And this has become such a purpose for us and such a cause for us. I'm in my 60s, so is my wife. We're not out there nowadays to invest and make a pile of money and become part of the 1%.
You've got to enjoy the last bit of life
We
you've
want
got.
to we want to put it back. We want to create an organization that will literally go after this 1% issue and begin to make the world more equal in that respect. And this is what my life is going to be dedicated to. It has been and it will continue to be dedicated to for the rest of my life. And I think Carolyn can attest to that as well.
agree.
We're ready to stand up for the 99%. Give us the opportunity to do that. When Carolyn gets her shares sold, we're going to dedicate ourselves to that purpose. And we'll lead the charge if the folks out there would have us to do that, literally.
What's interesting is I was raised in a bubble. And as I grew up and with my first marriage, I questioned what was in that bubble. And I sort of paid a slight price for that. But when I met Harmon, and
You never questioned Carl Dare, by the way. Go ahead.
You never question. When I met Harmon and he was arrested, the bubble burst. It was massive. All of a sudden, I was thrown into another part of society, another part of life that I had never been exposed to before, and it was like, holy cow, what has just happened? But I have to say that I don't regret 1 minute of it. I don't regret 1 minute of it, because it has taught me so much about life, about people, about the world, about corruption, about what's right and what's wrong, about what should happen and what shouldn't happen. And I shake my head. I shake my head at what keeps going on, and I go, this can't be, this shouldn't be, this shouldn't keep on happening. We have to do something about it. So I am now a part of the 99%.
Well, now, Carolyn,
and
you guys were talking. Sorry.
And I'm joining Harmon in that, so that we can make a difference. We really want to make a difference in this world.
Absolutely. Now, you were talking about how the Canadian Revenue Authority has actually seized your shares. I don't think I was aware of that until today.
Yep.
Now, of course,
in 2009 they did that.
Wow. So the shares are actually now owned by the Canadian Revenue Authority, but they can't sell them. Is that right?
Well, owned, they have control of them, I'll put it that way. Carolyn still owns the shares, but they have control of them, and they can sell them with that control.
Right, that's what I'm getting at.
But Carolyn can also sell them as well. In other words, if a buyer came along today and said, I want to buy your shares, she could sell the shares. The CRA would go, whoa, I'm going to get out of the way of that. We'll get our tax paid.
Well, so wait a minute. So why can't you just get a buyer?
Okay, now we're going back around the circle again. Why would a person, oh, you're a buyer. Why would you buy shares in a company where the shareholder agreement is written in such a way that the directors of that company can have the opportunity to never give you any dividends and never give you any benefit whatsoever?
Got it.
Because it's written in such a way.
You're constantly controlled.
And so why would you buy shares in a company like that?
No one would. So why would anyone invest in the
So even though the shareholder agreement says, now this is pretty basic, I think everybody can understand. The shareholder agreement says you're allowed to sell your shares.
Right.
If you decide to sell your shares and somebody comes along and makes an offer, then the boys have the first right to buy at that price, which is normal. That's pretty normal. She, in the process of that, when she learned about how she could sell her shares, and this is the way you go about it, she was told that the boys would not have, they didn't have to change anything in the shareholder agreement if a buyer came along. And then ultimately, when you look at the shareholder agreement in the small print, you find out that without a change, even though she was told she could sell her shares, she was told what the market value of her shares were at the time, which was $40 million. That was back in 2001, 2002. So she turned around when she got the shares and she said, look, I don't want to be a part of this. You go ahead and buy my shares for $40 million. They went, no, we don't want your shares. So he said, all right, you've turned it down, now I can go ahead and sell them. So as she went out to Kellogg's and other people out there to try to see who would buy them, nobody would buy them without an incredible discount.
Right.
Because they couldn't get any guarantee. The boys refused to alter the shareholder agreement so that a new owner could actually be guaranteed some opportunity for dividends.
Well,
that's why it's inherently oppressive, because why would anybody buy shares? Now, keep in mind, this is not the operating company that regularly gives dividends. This is the holding company that's controlled by the family.
And it's a privately held company, of course, right? It's not publicly traded. So
but it holds all the assets in the operating company. So it's got all the assets for a company that's worth, again, right now we don't know exactly, but probably $300 to $500 million. But even at that, she's the owner of shares in that company that has assets worth $500 million, probably. She's not getting any dividends, and she can't get any benefit out of the fact that she owns those shares. That's oppression.
Yeah, it's definitely a rigged agreement. What were you going to say, Karen?
Rigged is a good word. Yeah, go ahead, dear.
My father basically said in an email to him, he said, basically it was like, well, make my day, because I said I really want to sell my shares. He said, well, you can try and sell your shares, but I doubt you can sell your shares. So he knew when that agreement was written. He knew that it wouldn't happen. It couldn't happen.
But why would they throw this Swizz into the game when she got her shares? She was told she could sell her shares if she wanted to, and she was told, and here's what your shares are worth on the market, on fair market value.
Well, it certainly seems like
But reality
unfair.
said that was totally a
Yeah,
lie.
it was a total deception. Total
Right, so
deception.
unfair business practices or something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
So the thing
Yeah.
that stuck with me earlier was when you say that the Canadian Revenue Authority has got control of the shares, but they can't sell them.
They can sell them.
No, they can sell them.
They just can't find anybody who will buy them under those conditions.
Oh, they can't.
And they can't sell them for anything less than fair market value, which again is the same catch-22 that we were involved in when we were trying to
But
sell
for
them.
$9 million, if they're worth 40 or 50, you would think they might be able to find someone.
Except if they sell them for $9 million, if they sell them to Boys for $9 million, then they're liable for the difference between the 9 and the 50 million because they're really worth 50 million if you could sell them. You see how this, it's a catch-22, it just keeps going in a
goes
circle.
Around and around.
And then judges come along with a decision saying this is not oppressive,
Yeah,
and
that's
that you can sell your shares if you want. Well, that's a lie. Even the judges are agreeing with the stupid contractual shareholder agreement, which is inherently oppressive. Now you know why we want to take this on, if we have to the Supreme Court
How can a
to change
civil
the law.
case- How can a civil case go to the Supreme Court? Is that
Because you go to the Supreme Court when something is an issue at law, meaning the law should be changed because it's inherently unfair,
Got it.
or it's in the public interest for it to be changed.
Ah.
And there's a third condition in there, but anyway, this meets at least those two conditions.
Yes, it does.
So in other words, to change the law, and one of the things that the judge said in the original case that was dismissed was she actually asked in the court, this is what I was told by the girls who were there, she actually said to the boy's attorney, if I decide this against you, and I decide that this shareholder agreement is inherently oppressive, how would you expect the court and the market to deal with the fact that there are probably hundreds of families out there, wealthy families, who've used these same agreements?
Yeah.
They're all going to come running into the court with their attorneys and say, we're all being oppressed, and it's going to be a mess. And my reaction to that is, good. If it's not fair, it should be a mess.
Well, but wait a minute, though. You've just hit on another reason why the court might not want that.
Well, what you're saying is they don't want the mess, even if it's unlawful, even if it's oppressive.
Well, they just want to avoid having to do anything, probably.
Exactly right.
Deal with it. Exactly.
In other words, they're falling into the lap of the 1% who are controlling the 99%, including individuals within their family. They lose control. And here's the answer to that question. The 1% lose control. And guess who's probably a part of the 1%? Where do these judges get their positions? How much money do they make? How much investments do they have? And how connected are they and or paid off by the 1%?
Right.
As I've said before, the
listen,
bottom line is the
when
1% control the courts, they control the government, they control the political system, they control the police, they control everything.
When
Dear.
Harmon was in the United States and he was arrested and he went into court to get bail. This was before he went into jail. The prosecutor?
Oh, yeah.
The prosecutor?
Yeah.
The prosecutor said, well, we set bail at $50,000. The judge said, no, I'm going to set bail at how much was it?
150,000.
Why did you do that?
$150,000.
And
And
the
the prosecutor said, what? Like, why are you doing that? And
That's the
of course.
prosecutor.
yeah, in other words, the person who's supposed to want it. In other words, the DA's office said, well, here's what we're willing to set bail at, and the judge says, no, I don't like that. I'm going to put it up to 150.
Why did the judge do that?
Well,
Because he was influenced. This is what goes on all the
see,
time.
they knew that Carolyn's father was
Wait,
Carl
give her a
Dare.
minute. Give her a minute.
Yep. Go ahead.
You were in a rant there,
Go
Carolyn.
ahead. Go with the rant.
Oh, it makes me so angry when stuff like this happens. It's like I wanted to go to the judge and say, "You little pipsqueak," and I want to call him something worse than that. How dare you do that? You evil person who's been influenced. You should be ashamed of yourself.
See, what he knew was that they wanted to keep me in jail, and so they figured if they set the bail high enough, I wouldn't be able to get out of jail
Right.
unless Papa stepped in and put up the money. Okay, but Papa wasn't going to do that in the States. He did it in Canada for 600,000, but he wasn't going to do that in the States. But in the meantime, that's when we knew that they had violated the Hague Commission Treaty law. So we had an attorney on that, and it took him 3 weeks to wake up the federal government and the federal judge to the fact that they'd violated the treaty between the two countries. Then they had to let me go. They had to drop the charges, they sealed the file, and they had to let me go. And they were, believe me, they were so ticked off at that. The fact that I had defeated them.
They had to let him go because Harmon had to represent himself because they did it over the long weekend when his attorney was away. And they brought him into court without an attorney. Outrageous. This whole story is just, I just get so angry and I get so frustrated because the evil and the corruption goes to the beyond. It's just beyond.
When they were told by the federal judge that they had to let me go, and the judge gave an order and sealed the file, there was an order that said not only did they have to let me go, but they couldn't detain me for anything else under any circumstances except the original charges that were in the
That's unusual.
In the extortion. I mean, in the extradition. Well, they knew that the extradition charges were stupid, and they couldn't get away with that because I went down there to get them dismissed. So they weren't allowed to hold me or to do anything else to me. They could only deal with those charges. They didn't want to deal with the charges. Okay. So she comes to the federal prison to pick me up when they were forced to let me go. She comes in the front door. I'm not there. While she's coming in the front door, and she drove all the way from Colorado Springs, about 65 miles to pick me up, federal marshals were taking me out the back door. It was just before a 4-day holiday weekend. They took me out the back door, put me in belly chains, handcuffs, leg irons, the whole thing. And the whole time I was screaming at them. There's a federal judge's order that says you can't do this. And one of the guys got right in my face and said, if you don't shut up, we're going to beat the hell out of you. I don't care what the federal judge says. We've got you now. You're in my custody. You'll do what you're told.
Wow.
So I
Do you know who that marshal was?
Oh, I can't give you his name right now, but
it's in Harmon's
it wouldn't be
notebook,
difficult to find. It's in one of my notebooks. But so then I said, all right, well, so I got in the van, the police van. I said, where are you taking me? None of your damn business.
Did anything happen to this guy?
No, of course not. Of course
No,
not.
of course not.
I said, where are you taking me? They said, none of your damn business. They drove and they drove and they drove and they drove way out in the country, and they drove into the Arapahoe County Court, which was another county altogether. It was a courthouse with a jail there.
Right.
And the first time when they first took me out, this story is amazing. When they first took me from the federal prison, they took me right downtown Denver, and they threw me in the drug and the drunk tank downtown Denver. And that's where you've probably seen online where I said, well, what are the charges? Well, there weren't any charges. Well, all right, what's the bail?
No
Well, there wasn't any bail. So before I left there, I actually stopped at the administration point, even though they still had me in belly chains and handcuffs and so on. And I said, I want the certificate. I want a record of what's happened here. And there was a gal there behind the desk who looked at me almost with a wink and said, you bet, because she knew that what they were doing were wrong. So she printed this thing out and she gave it to me.
Really?
Yes.
Nice.
We have that.
We still got it. In fact, I've scanned it and put it on my website.
Oh, it's a relief to know that at least someone there in the system knows what's right and wrong.
Well, then they took me after 4 days of 24-hour lockdown in a cell that was about a 3 foot by 6 foot. I was greasy. I was filthy. They'd take me out of the cell in the middle of the night and harass me, take me downstairs, start asking me questions. The guys would surround me. They weren't trying to beat me. They were trying to drive me nuts.
Yeah.
After 4 days of that, then they put me back into a police van, and that's when they took me out to Arapahoe County.
This is your diesel therapy.
That's right. Exactly. They took me from the Denver City Jail out to Arapahoe County. They put me in a holding cell. Now, holding cells don't have a bunk or anything. They just have a concrete sort of a seat around the edge. At least that one did. So I'm sitting in a holding cell, and I'm exhausted. And I'm thinking, all right, what are they going to do with me next? About 3 hours of that had had enough. So I said, I don't care what they do to me. This is crap. So I went to the cell door, and I started beating on it and screaming my head off. I want to see a judge. This is nonsense. This is wrong. And finally, somebody came along the hallway. It was a pretty isolated cell. And they said to me, what the heck is wrong with you? And I said, here's what's going on. And I explained it to this guy. And he said, interesting. I didn't know that. I'll be right back. He goes away. He comes back and he says, we've managed to find a judge. There was a judge on staff somewhere. It was on a weekend. You're going to go before a judge within the next half hour or so. And I said, good.
Wow.
So at that point in time, the DA who pulled all this stuff over in the Denver County area.
Southers.
No, well, no, Southers was part of this, but at this point in time, they had to be transferred to the Denver DA.
Oh, right. He was Colorado Springs.
But keep in mind, Southers was sort of the big muckety-muck. He was in charge of the DA's fraternity, so to speak, throughout the whole state. So believe me, he was pulling strings all over the place. If you recall, at the time, he was in charge of the jail and the prison system.
Wow.
You remember that in the outline?
It's good to recap it, yeah.
Oh yeah. So here we go with the timeline now beginning to match up. So they took me out of the cell, took me into a courtroom, prison uniform, federal prison uniform, numbers across my chest. Picture this. Filthy, greasy, exhausted.
Well, you hadn't had a shower in 4 days.
Yeah, exhausted. Leg irons, belly chains, handcuffs.
They're making you look like a criminal.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know how you walk in when you have leg irons on?
I don't know, but I can imagine.
With a cop on either side of me, you know, like I'm some sort of an axe murderer.
Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah, exactly. They sit me down, and then all of a sudden, in rushes the district attorney from Denver. His name was Larry Bowling. You hear me, Larry? And he was scared.
Why was he scared?
Because he knew that they had violated the federal order.
Really?
So he was scared. He didn't expect me to be able to get away with this and get out and get before a judge. Nobody expected that. He walks in with a couple of guys beside him, and I sit on one side. He sits on the other side. The judge walks in. It was a fairly young woman. I mean, I don't think she was a real heavy-duty, experienced judge, but you could tell she knew what she was doing. And the first thing she said, she looked at me and she was like, "Whoa, Mr. Wilfred, where's your attorney?" And I said, "Good question, Your Honor. This is a holiday weekend. My guess is he's on holiday somewhere and nobody knows how to reach him. And these people deliberately violated a federal order to let me go 4 days ago from the federal prison. And they put me in the Denver City Jail. Then they brought me out here. And they're just screwing with me, Your Honor. But they're sitting there with an order from a federal judge that they're supposed to let me go. And so they're violating a federal order. And if you, Your Honor, continue to hold me on at any level or try to adjudicate anything against me, you're violating the federal judge's order."
What did she say to that? That's pretty strong.
Well, that knocked her back a little bit. She was like, "Oh." She looks over at Larry Bowling and she goes, "Mr. Bowling, is this true?" And he's like, "Yeah, Your Honor, it is true. Approach the bench." So he and these other two guys he had with him approach the bench, and they're whispering. And then he goes back to his seat, and she said, "All right, Mr. Wilfred, I'm going to let you go if you will pay a $750,000 bail."
I remember you telling me this.
That's right.
How did she come up with that, and why? That still seems in violation of
No
federal
idea.
order.
I laughed. And she said, "You think this is funny, Mr. Wilfred?" By the way, I have the transcript on this. You think this? I said, "No. The reason it's funny, Your Honor, is because these guys have broken me down to my socks. I have no money. If you ask for 10 cents bail right now, you'd have to put me back in the cell. If you put me back in the cell, you're violating the federal order.
So what did she do?
So you're going to have to let me go." "Oh, okay, approach the bench." These guys approach the bench again.
Well played, Harmon.
Whisper,
I have
whisper,
to say.
whisper, 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 whisper. They go back, and she says, "All right, Mr. Wilfred, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to let you go today, and you're going to have to be back here in 30 days for a financial examination to see what money you do have and see where your assets are." And I was like, "Okay, cool." She said, "And if you don't return in 30 days, then you'll owe the court $750,000. And I thought about that for a minute, and I thought, you know what? That order is still in violation of the federal order.
Yeah, she's making up new rules.
Yeah. So, and I thought to myself, if I continue to argue with her, they'll end up keeping me here, and I don't want to do that. So I thought, you know, once I'm out, we'll get that.
Can fight it
we'll get that order
effectively.
thrown out. But the first thing I need to do is get out of here. So I said,
Right.
"All right, Your Honor, I agree."
Okay.
They waddled me over to a window. They took all my cuffs and stuff off. And I said, "All right, where's my clothes?" Because when they threw me in the federal prison in the first place, they took my clothes and everything. And so
they didn't have them, of course.
they sent them back to Canada. They fully expected to keep me indefinitely because all my stuff had been put in a box and shipped back to my address in Canada.
So what did you do?
I had a federal prison outfit on with a number across the front.
You went to Disneyland.
Absolutely filthy, exhausted, and they said they said, well, we don't have your clothes. And I said, well, I can't go out like this. They said, well, you're welcome to keep the prison uniform. You don't have anything else.
Wow.
That's the way it goes. This is the way we're.
So you just walked outside wearing a prison uniform.
Well, keep in mind.
You should go to a restaurant and sit down. Like,
Keep in mind, the police station was right next door to the court.
they're going to arrest you right away when you walk
And
outside.
I said to them, look, when I walk out of here, and by the way, it was on a country road, a nice highway, but it went for a long way
They're gonna
before you
think
got to any city.
escaped from prison.
And here I am walking up a country road with a federal prison uniform on, no ID, no documentation of paperwork of any kind. These guys are going to pick me up and say, what the hell, you've escaped. They're going to put me back in there.
Right.
So I said, can I make a phone call? No. Well, wait a minute. I need to call my wife. At least I got to get a hold of somebody to come pick me up. No. They put me out in the lobby. Now keep in mind, this is about 3:30 or 4 in the afternoon. The lobby closes at 5. There were people there who were sitting there wanting to visit prisoners. You know, there were visitors in the lobby.
How did they react to you?
Oh, you should have seen the look on their faces. These guys pushed me out into the lobby, and I'm standing there, you know, filthy, prison uniform, big number on the thing and so on, and everybody's looking at me like, oh, God. So I went over and I sat down, and I mean to tell you, talk about prayer. I mean, during this whole time, I was very faithful, and I'm faithful to pray. I just said, Father in heaven, you've got to tell me what I can do, because once 5 o'clock comes around, they're going to close this thing, they're going to throw me out on the street, and then I'm going to get rearrested. And I had, and the uniform was a short sleeve thing, and it was probably
freezing outside.
It was probably 40, 45 degrees outside.
Wow.
So I thought about it, and I prayed about it.
No money, no credit cards.
Nothing.
Wow.
I thought about it, and I thought about it, and then I looked over on the wall, and there was a payphone on the wall.
Call collect.
And I thought, oh, wait a minute. I remember that we had a phone plan in Canada where there was a 1-800 number that you called, and then you put in a code, and I had the code in my head, and I knew what her number was in Colorado Springs, where she was staying there. So I thought, I wonder if I can get away with this, if I can call the 1-800 number, and it'll actually put me through to the Canada Bell, the Canadian thing, and actually let me make a long-distance call. Lo and behold, I went over to that phone, I started dialing it, and it worked.
Amazing. And so Carolyn came and
so I got a hold of Carolyn. That was the story where she got a hold of her. I got a hold of her girlfriend where she was staying. She was staying at this gal's house from a church in Colorado Springs. And the gal said, "Who? You must be joking. Where are you?" And I said, "Well," I said, "Where is she?" And she said, "She went out walking. She's walking and praying. She's crying a lot. She doesn't know, because keep in mind, remember, she was at the federal prison to pick me up,
and had no idea where you were.
She had no idea where I was.
Wow.
And the attorneys didn't have any idea where I was. They'd lost me in the system.
So Carolyn, what happened? Your friend?
I was out walking and praying, as I did every single day. The whole time he was in jail, I'd pray. And as I was walking back towards this lady's house, who very kindly allowed me to stay, although I did do her cleaning, her ironing, I looked after her son.
Keep in
I
mind,
did the
this
cooking.
is the Dare heiress. Go ahead.
And she was young, and she had a lot of clothes that needed washing and ironing, and then she had 2 pit bulls that I looked after, and a boa constrictor, of which I said the boa constrictor could not roam the house freely, but I looked after the pit bulls.
Wow.
Oh, I'm telling you,
because her father wouldn't give her any money.
But now wait a minute, Carolyn. No. That was your edict that the boa constrictor could not roam the house freely? This woman preferred to have it do that?
That's correct.
Wow.
I said, no, I know. Dear God.
Well, anyway, she's out walking.
Wait. So, so what happened? You're out walking.
I'm out walking, and I'm praying, and all of a sudden I hear the dear Lord say to me, sing. And I'm like, oh, God, what have I got to sing about, really? Because, my husband's in jail somewhere. He's somewhere. I don't even know where he is. He may be in jail. He may be whatever, dead, whatever. So I started singing. And just as I round the corner, the girl came running up, around the corner, she was about 3 houses away. She came running up with the phone in her hand saying, your husband's on the phone, your husband's on the phone, he's out of jail. Well, I cried even more.
Wow. Well, plus now you're on a timeline because you had to get there and pick them up before it
Well,
closed.
she couldn't, but fortunately
Well,
we had a private investigator who was also watching over her.
yeah,
He had people guarding her because he said the Clintons are so evil and so I mean, he
yeah.
knew this are so
He
so
said
bad that he
this is
had
so
people
bad
watching
that
her.
yeah.
He had guards on her at the house.
Wow.
I did not know that he had people tailing me, making sure I was all right. Which God
Wow.
bless him for that,
But he had a
because
guy in Denver
he said
who
this is so bad and this is so big that you might be in danger. So
Wow.
that's why I've never actually laid foot in the United States
since
since
then, yeah.
until this is over.
Wow.
Yeah, because I don't trust them. I don't trust them. But anyhow, yeah. Finally, Harmon and I got
This
together.
guy, this private investigator had a guy that worked for him in Denver.
Came picked you up
He
at
phoned
jail.
him. He came and picked me up because it was outside of Denver where I was.
Wow.
And then he drove me
We met
65
at the
miles south
pastor's.
to
We
meet
met
up
at the
with Carolyn.
pastor's house. Then there was a convention going on where we tried to find a room, and we finally found a room. And of course, I had found out that day that Harmon got released from prison that his father had passed away. The
While I was
next
in
day
jail.
it was his father's birthday, and I
My dad
couldn't
died.
tell him when he got out of prison. The next day was his father's birthday. He said, "I'll have to call my dad and wish him a happy birthday," and that's when I had to tell him. I said, "I'm sorry, but your dad passed away."
The day that I
And
got out of jail.
That must have been crushing.
Oh, oh.
it was. I mean, it's just it's
You
horrific.
really
This
want
still
to you want to
is.
hate them. You know, you talk about being offended. You just want to hate them, but you can't carry that kind of hate with you. You've got to let it go. You've got to forgive, but you don't allow them to get away with it. You continue to pursue the situation to expose the thing,
It's okay.
but you can't do it with so much hate in your heart. You've got to let go of that.
Yeah.
These
yeah.
people did this on purpose.
I mean, talk
But
about.
anyhow, getting back to the outline. Of course, when you're talking about bullies and you're talking about people who who are cruel on purpose.
Yeah.
I mean, this is cruelty on purpose.
All
which
of it.
I
Her
just
brothers
do not want to
especially.
have. I do not want to have anything to do with people who are cruel on purpose, because it's wrong. It's just wrong.
It's
So
unthinkable cruelty.
yeah, well, yeah. So anyhow, I wanted to get back to the outline just to sort of finish this up quickly,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that the next time we can go on to a different subject. But when I was in my teens, I was refused work at Dare Foods. Even just answering the phone, I said to my dad, "Gee, Dad, can I work at the company?" And even if I'm just at the front entrance, the front lobby, answering the phones and taking messages and transferring them to the various people, no, the answer was no. So I had graduated from early childhood education. I was trained to teach nursery school and look after small children. So I suggested, "What a great idea, Dad! In the plant, you should have a daycare facility in the plant for your employees. That would be wonderful."
Yeah.
And then I could work there. No, the answer was no. So when I was living in New Zealand, I suggested that Dare occupy a warehouse or build a plant in New Zealand because they wanted to get into China and they could
We have a free
utilize
trade agreement here for China.
the free trade agreement between New Zealand and China, which would be so beneficial to Dare.
Would grow the company.
And grow the company. The answer was no. Then when we had our IT company, which was doing very well, and it was saving, we did that on purpose because when we first moved to New Zealand, the cost to call Canada and friends was just outrageous. This was before Skype.
Right.
It was just
Oh.
outrageous. It was
Right.
just outrageous. So we decided to set up an IT company to help those who had family overseas or whatever.
And little by little, that
save on
graduated
their
into a
costs.
full-blown company. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. To save on their costs to call family, because we know that family is important and you should be able to speak to your family without, bankrupting you. And I said, why don't you use our IT company in the company so you can call overseas and do all your phone
Save money.
work through our IT company, and
Because they're a global
and do it for
company.
money. The
Right.
answer was no.
Well, they should have made you an
answer was no.
executive there, Carolyn. You had a lot of good ideas that would have grown the company.
They said I didn't have the aptitude. In court, in the oppression case, my brother said I didn't have the aptitude to work in the business.
Wow.
And what
But
do you think
yet
about that?
you collectively came up with a voice over IP company at a time when that was new
That's right.
technology that even Skype
That's right.
hadn't leveraged yet.
That's right.
That's just
That's right.
stupid, these Dare brothers. I don't, I hope when people take that Dare cookie and put it to their lips, they think of all of this horrendous
This
behavior.
wonderful family-owned company in Canada, right?
Yeah.
So then I made another suggestion. I said, really, there are people in the world today who are starving. This is wrong. There should never be anybody who is starving. There is enough food in this world to go around to feed everybody. So why don't you make a nutritionally complete cookie to feed the hungry? I mean, I said if it's nutritionally complete, it can be softened in water. A mother could chew on it and put her enzymes from her saliva into it and feed her baby, feed her child. You can soften it in milk. You can just use it as a regular cookie, but it's nutritionally complete. It would
Not
be
all the sugar
dry
and
so
junk,
that
yeah.
it wouldn't go bad. I said, why don't you do something like that to help, feed the hungry and do something really beneficial for the world? The answer was no.
Huh. Carolyn, in my
So,
observation of Dare Foods products, because before I met you guys, I was totally unaware of the company, they seem more interested in using hydrogenated oil and high fructose corn syrup and products that'll reduce or I should say, ingredients that will reduce the cost and increase the life of their products rather than be focused on
yeah.
nutrition or what's good for people consuming the products.
Well, they're starting to sort of, get into, they've got gluten-free and stuff like that. But
That's market pressure, though. They obviously don't care about anyone but themselves.
Yeah, I personally don't eat the product. I have trouble with wheat, and I definitely have trouble with sugar. So, but as a female in a German family, in a traditional German family, I was never encouraged to participate in the business at any time, at any level. And when I made suggestions, the answer was always no. So I remember in court somebody said to me, well, why didn't you do this and why didn't you that? I said, because I got tired of hearing the word no.
Right.
So why bother? Why should I make an effort when all the time I get no?
And you're describing, of course, a pattern and practice of oppression beyond just the shares. Anything, I mean, even things that are quite obviously beneficial or would be beneficial to the company were just rejected out of hand.
Totally rejected out
It's
of
a
hand.
shocking story, and I like this format where we're discussing it more than reading the list. But is there anything else in the outline that you want to cover?
Yeah, I just want to finish this.
Oh, yes.
So when I became involved with Harmon and he was arrested and released from jail, the men in my family, especially my brother Graham and his wife Sandy, decided that we were not sociably acceptable and that we should be shunned. My mother, who was my best advocate, was very upset and crying because she was not well, she could not stand up to the men in my family any longer. Harmon and I were told that we were no longer invited to any family gatherings other than my parents' birthday, which of course couldn't be avoided. So to keep the peace in my family, I said, fine. I didn't want to upset my mother. I just said, fine, we'll celebrate Thanksgiving by ourselves. Christmas, we celebrated with my parents the day before. Of course, I wasn't involved with my brothers at all in any of that. But that's been going on for 20 years. The shunning. Oh my gosh, you're not sociably acceptable, so we will shun you. You're not doing as we say. You're not divorcing your husband. You're not leaving your husband. Then you get shunned.
And then you get not one penny, as her father said.
And not one penny, not one more penny. And
strange.
my daughter worked at Dare Foods for almost 5 years.
Really?
And my brothers, I mean, this is the preponderance of evidence. And I don't know what it has to do with me, whether it's because I'm adopted, I'm not blood, or
Woman.
whether they had a thing against me, whether they just didn't understand me because I'm very different from the rest of my family. But even my daughter was oppressed in the company. She graduated in business from college, and she worked very hard for 5 years at Dare in the mailroom and finance and marketing. And she was told by the former president that if she thought she was going to get anywhere in the company, she was sadly mistaken. So she went to my brothers and she said, "Look, I'm I'm a member of this family. I really want to work with this company and work my way up." No, no support whatsoever. And she was so harassed that she left. She had to leave the company.
You know, Carolyn, pardon me if this sounds rude, but they should consider changing the name of the company to the Dick Food Company. Because just, that's,
Oh, it's terrible.
it's
And so
terrible.
when she went to my father, her grandfather, to complain, he wanted the family to spend more time together. I mean, it was too little, too late. She complained that this is the way she was being treated, especially by her uncle Graham and his wife Sandy. He was very, very upset. And so he went and he said, "Well, I'm going to go talk to them." So he went and he talked to them. And after his discussion, he came back and he told her that because she supported Harmon and me, she was tainted for life.
Crazy.
Because she supported Harmon and me. Now, Carla used to also hang out with her cousin, one of Graham's daughters, but it had to be done in secret because of the prejudice between our families. When Graham and his wife Sandy found out about their friendship, they told their daughter that she could no longer be involved with my daughter or suffer the consequences. End of friendship, end of discussion.
Wow.
So it would appear that anyone who supports Harmon and me suffers retribution. What is that? Cult. I'm sorry, but it's cult.
And
it's
you
a
take
family
that,
cult.
you take that, and you put it into the corporate documents, and you allow them to use those corporate documents to continue to carry out this kind of oppression and this kind of prejudice. That's what we were most objecting to from a court perspective, is that families should be no longer able to use corporate documents to justify oppressing their own families.
Yeah, it's like dysfunctional family becomes dysfunctional company.
That's right.
So basically, if you disagree and disobey, you're shunned and completely cut off financially unless you do what you're told. It's funny that my father taught my brother that ethics, morality, and even love can be purchased.
Whoa.
That means nothing, and the courts clearly agree that what Carl there wants, Carl there gets. And now his sons have inherited these affluent privileges. The rich and the powerful owning, as Harmon said, own and control the governments, the courts, the tax system, the law enforcement. And these rules seem to apply all the way from the Dares all the way up to the Rothschilds. And what the rich have clearly forgotten is that we, the people, can bring this global, codependent, cult-like relationship down by simply refusing to enable them to continue opportunity to pick our collective pockets. And Harmon can definitely add to that one. But honestly, this is like well, it is. It goes from the tiny little mini family all the way up to the big, huge corporate structures, the governments, the Rothschilds, you name it. And I'm sick of it. To be honest with you, I'm sick of it. I think it's absolutely an abomination to humankind. It's an abomination to humankind.
Absolutely.
And it's got to stop.
I have to tell you, I mean,
So there.
of the episodes we've done in America's First Refugee, this may be the best. I mean, you guys have really had an opportunity to share the story in a way that, Harmon, I'm so glad that I came here to New Zealand to see you, because sitting face to face here, and Carolyn, I wish you could be here with us, but I am understanding the story so much more than I have previously, even through the numerous episodes that we've had. For a long time, you know, we've been doing this show for several months. It's been a bit of a curiosity to me that it isn't getting more viewership, because I've always felt, and after today, I feel it much more than I have before, that whatever people think about you, Harmon, or you, Carolyn, or me, this is a story that everyone needs to be concerned with. The fact that people can be oppressed, whether it's by family or unjust business contracts or the government or the court system or even individuals within the federal marshal system or within an individual city jail. We just can't stop sharing this information, and the people watching can't rest until the people that are doing these things are actually brought to justice.
And it's all about the money.
Yeah,
It's all about the money.
it is. Yeah, and honestly, the money didn't help us when we went down to the United States. We spent, as I said before, we spent $400,000, and Harmon never made it into a courtroom. So you can't say that
To
money,
challenge the
you know,
charges, yeah.
money buys freedom or money does this. No, 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 no. That's not true at all. That's not the politics, the retribution, the power, that all steps in.
And the amount of money. I mean, $400,000 is nothing compared to what these people out there actually have and what they own and how they literally own the political systems and the legal systems and the law systems and so on. So if you've got money, it better be a heck of a lot if you're going to step up and challenge these guys. But listen, I've always believed, and this is what attracted us to you guys, to you and Charles and the rest of you, I've always believed in the fact that the truth will set you free. Not the money comes first that'll buy the truth that'll set you free. I think the truth ultimately is what does it. I'm going to continue to believe in that. We will take money that we've got and money that we'll get and continue to do the things that are necessary, to go to the courts, to go whatever in whatever systems, to fund things that challenge these 1%, 99% nonsense. But in the end, I really believe that if we all get together, a collective truth, crowdsource the truth, if you will, that's the truth that will set us free. That's the truth that will bring this system down where people will finally get together and say, is enough. And as Carolyn said, they can no longer pick our collective pockets because without the populations of the world, they got nothing. We continue to cooperate in this cult, in this codependent world where we literally are assisting them. We're literally doing this to keep them going, enabling them, funding them, whatever, because we continue to cooperate with this system. We need to stop it.
And I just want to say one more thing. Of course, with this video and with what's going on, there's going to be huge resistance. There's going to be huge spiritual resistance as well as huge resistance on this earth. Natural resistance. So please, everybody, just keep praying and we will break through. We're not going to quit until we do.
Support us with prayer. Watch the videos. Support Jason as much as you can. And let's work with the blogosphere and with the folks like Jason and other people who are really truly getting the truth out there, because the mainstream media is not where it's at. The CIA and other groups control that completely. I'm convinced of that nowadays. So follow us. Get together with us. Social media with us. Let's combine forces and let's stop this nonsense.
Thank you.
Carolyn, Harmon, it's an incredibly powerful message. I'm so pleased to be able to help you guys in whatever way I can, and we'll be back next week with another episode of America's First Refugee.
There you go.
Thanks for watching.
God bless.
Thanks.